The Demise of Barnstable District Attorney Michael O'Keefe, a public relations nightmare 20 years in the making. This presentation examines a number of missteps and mistakes made by Barnstable District Attorney Michael O'Keefe during his tenure as Barnstable's most prominent public safety officer. DA Michael O'Keefe has been under investigation for 10 of the last 20 years for corruption by the U.S. Attorney's Office, and this presentation outlines the punctus that brought about his demise. Michael O'Keefe claims to be from Waltham, the son of an Irish immigrant, and a mother who was a nursemaid for Cardinal Cushing. Unfortunately, he has a nasty little habit of pushing at times an antiquated Irish Catholic value system on people he decides are sinners, often the innocent, victims, who he somehow believes need to take responsibility for his transgressions. What O'Keefe doesn't understand is that according to theology and scripture, there is no forgiveness for corruption. O'Keefe attended BC, and while he was a student at New England School of Law at night, he worked as the Demise police officer. He then went on to become first assistant at District Attorney Rollins' office and took over at the helm in 2002. And that's when I began to notice all of the mistakes that O'Keefe made. I met him in April of 2002 and watched a disastrous tenure and began to report everything I knew to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Now, when I met Mr. O'Keefe in April of 2002, I simply did not reveal to him that law and politics was the Griffin family business. To Mr. O'Keefe, I was just some homeless person who had strayed into downtown Hyannis, and I could be used to develop information that we hoped at one point would shutter a negligent human service organization that was harboring convicted felons. I did not tell Mr. O'Keefe that my grandfather graduated from the Harvard Law School in 1930. He was the General Counsel to Reconstruction Finance Corporation, one of the original New Deal organizations established under Hoover, and became integral under the Roosevelt administration. My grandfather was mentored by, he became a Supreme Court Justice, Felix Frankfurter, his professor at Harvard University, and Frankfurter became the founder of the ACLU. He's one of the sharpest legal minds in history. He mentored my grandfather, and my grandfather has mentored me. We had connections, cousins that are the Senate Majority Leader George Mitchell in Washington, D.C. My cousin was, at the time that O'Keefe met me, was the district attorney for Bristol County. My grandfather had clients that were ambassadors and very prominent people. Mr. O'Keefe simply doesn't know this. He sized me up as a homeless person who simply had no education, no ability to be able to stand up for myself or anyone else. He underestimated the adversary, and it has come back to bite him in the proverbial ass. You'll find a little bit more out as we continue. Here's a timeline of a few of the things that went wrong in downtown Hyannis during O'Keefe's tenure that demonstrated compromise to public safety and a compromise to the health, welfare, and safety of innocent people, especially children that lived within walking distance of this shelter. In 1998, when District Attorney Michael O'Keefe was the first assistant under District Attorney Rollins, there was the murder of Ricky Weldon by Lisa Weldon, both known to this shelter. As it turned out, Lisa Weldon was the daughter of a very well-known restaurateur who had connections with the District Attorney's office. The murder was covered up so beautifully that you cannot even find a death certificate in the clerk's office in Barnstable. But homeless people remembered being at the funeral, they remembered the incident, and since then I have come up with a document that clearly shows a newspaper article that it happened the way they said it did. Lisa Weldon was found not competent, not able to take criminal responsibility for her actions. She was sent to Taunton State Hospital, quote, for the rest of her life, which is not possible. You can only be committed for 6 months, then you get another hearing, then another hearing. In 4 years, they decided she was well enough, let her go, and in 2004, she was out check-kiting, according to some of the court documents I found. In July of 2011, 1998, there was the rape and murder of Melissa Gossel by Michael Gentile. They say Gentile. Apparently, the homeless said he referred to his last name as Gentili. Michael, Stephen, and Bill Gentili were all known to the Salvation Army and the Noah Center complex, with the O'Neill Duffy Clinic being adjacent. They were all known. It turns out he had picked Melissa Gossel up on the street, claimed close to the Friendlies at the Sagamore Bridge, and told her he would help her with her car, drove her to a wooded lot close to his aunt's donut shop in Pembroke, raped her and buried her in a grave. And they covered up the fact that Michael and Stephen were known to the shelter, and I guess Phil Gentili was punctual every morning for his morning donut at the Salvation Army, drove around at night with a pack of beer picking up women. It was a very interesting case. So anyway, so that was pretty much covered up that the Gentilis were known to the shelter. In January 6th of 2002, and at this point I've come to Hyannis, I've been there since right after the events of 9/11, right about October 15th. And in January 6th of 2002, there's the murder of Christa Worthington. And there are a number of violent felons that I'm being told, including child rapists, that are known to this shelter. And as it turns out, the Worthington murder, I thought, happened so far away in Truro that it just simply wasn't the responsibility of anything or anybody at the shelter. It turns out I was wrong about that. In mid-April of 2002, I met with O'Keefe and agreed to move into narcotics-infested housing to investigate negligent human services. Mr. O'Keefe sized me up. I think he figured if anything went wrong, he wouldn't have to worry because he thought I was powerless. I made an argument, and it was my argument, to go in and to raise or to dismantle homeless camps that were springing up all over town, and I will explain to you in a moment why they were springing up. In 2002, between May and August, there were issues at the property where I lived. There was heavy drug trafficking. There were drug shipments coming in. I was assisting the DEA with the interception of drug shipments, and Michael O'Keefe does not know this. For instance, there was an interception of a major narcotics shipment on Christmas of 2002, and it was very, very serious. Boston had in advance $500,000 to narcotics dealers in the drug trade, and the shipment was intercepted off of Block Island with about 2 hours to spare. I assisted DEA Special Agent Lewis in the interception of this shipment, and I had it on Christmas, and I did make it in time for the 7 o'clock service to cantor and to sing the service for the children's mass. I would want you to know that. Okay, in May of 2003, O'Keefe, this was not O'Keefe blocking the Demise Fields project. I blocked the Demise Fields project. What happened was the organization was sponsoring an $11.5 million project out in Sandwich, an experimental project where they were going to put criminal offenders and mentally ill people on the same project. They were trying to get ZBA approval, and that was part of the problem. They had this, all of the money was going to this project where these two clients, these two executives were building $500,000 homes for themselves. And that's the reason why the problem was spinning out of control. All the money was going to the development of this experimental project, and the homeless problem was spinning out of control. In August 2003, I argued, not O'Keefe, I argued for the delay in the decision to expand the NOAA shelter to the Barnstable Airport property. During the time that these arguments were being made, there was a huge public relations problem, public relations disaster for Michael O'Keefe, and an image problem because he was taking campaign contributions from the organizations that were sponsoring these lavish expansion projects that were harboring these offenders. When Michael O'Keefe found out I was digging into it, he had me arrested. There were several attempts to arrest me. He couldn't arrest me, and it turns out that he knew about these efforts, and there were 3 attempts on my life, believe it or not. There really were 3 attempts on my life, and apparently O'Keefe knew about them. In October 2nd of 2003, we dealt with the rape and homicide of Jonathan Westner of Falmouth. It was covered up by O'Keefe because Judy Best of Duffy Clinic, who he knows, he sits beside her at the sponsoring of some of these projects, offered to cover it up for Jonathan Westner, and he ended up having to fire her. April 15th of 2005, there's the arrest of the garbage man Christopher McCowan for the rape and homicide of Christa Worthington. During one of the botched arrests for me, there was the CFO of the Barnstable District Attorney's Office, Paul Niedzwiecki, questioned me about a psychological profile I was developing for an offender, changed the entire course of the case, and eventually they did arrest somebody for 2005. The case is up for appeal, and considering what I have discovered, and I will explain this to you, probably will not be able to keep Mr. McCowan in jail. There are major problems with the investigation, major problems with the prosecution of this case. I will be explaining that to you. In 2005, when I threatened to send the information that I had acquired at that point to the father of the victim in the Worthington case, there was a sudden removal of Chief John Finnegan from office. He had accepted a $21,000 pay increase over per year annually and a 5-year contract to cover up the problems at the shelter. In November 16th of 2006, McCowan was convicted. In 2008, the Cape Cod Voice published the case against our illustrious District Attorney Michael O'Keefe. I am the source for the article. Another public relations nightmare for him. Recently, there has been the shooting of Sean Gannon by the Thomas Latanowicz. Sean Gannon was a Yarmouth police officer that was serving an arrest warrant, and it turns out that Latanowicz was also known to this shelter. August 20th, 2001, there is a major public relations nightmare at a press conference for Michael O'Keefe that has brought about his demise, his complete demise, completely destroyed his career. And he is now retiring, and we now have a new candidate for district attorney. January 5th of 2022, District Attorney Michael O'Keefe announces he will not seek re-election. He has been under investigation the entire time, and so far there has been no movement to arrest this man. I found this to be a little bit amusing. This is a banner that the town put up to celebrate. In 2007, Barnstable was in contention to become the Barnstable All-American City, and they won, building a better Barnstable, one child, one family, one neighborhood at a time. It turned out they were well aware of these problems. I was bringing all of the issues related to the compromise of public health, welfare, and safety up every 2 weeks at the town council meetings. And for the most part, people were handling things on the inside so they could protect their own jobs, they could protect their own careers, and they could see to it they were not sued. But there was never any resolution on how they were going to close the shelter, which is what I had wanted, and to be honest with you, is what I had demanded. So the town of Barnstable and Greater Barnstable County, one big delusion of the damned. This is the handiwork of the Noah shelter. There were so many clients spinning out of control that were unable to be recovered, unable to be rehabilitated, and the organization was billing for them as they were planning extravagant expansion projects. We had people camping all over Hyannis. Crack houses were springing up everywhere, and as you can see, it's a threat to health, welfare, and safety of all individuals, not just the homeless population, but the population of townspeople around it and people in Greater Barnstable County that support the industry by tax dollar. The organization was supported by 96 to 90% taxpayer funds. For instance, here is the shelter and actually the edge of the clinic and a sober house called the Chase Sober House right next to it. The clinic was so deficient, they were so negligent, and the organization was so negligent that in the sober house, just about where that arrow is pointed, there was a death where a formerly homeless person was found in bed. Apparently, he had been decomposing for 2 weeks. Nobody had seen him anywhere, and they had to call the coroner to bring him out. It was quite a to-do. They moved another client into that same bedroom, and same thing happened to him 2 weeks later. The other clients of the sober house started to notice an unusual smell, and they told Livia to come over with the coroner, and it turned out there was another dead body. And so I'm trying to make my point that this organization truly was negligent. Now, these are my buddies Marvin and Perry. Perry has got a long history of rape. He's been in and out of Cedar Junction for rape. Marvin has been in and out of Cedar Junction for crimes related to narcotics abuse, generally grand theft auto and things like that. And they offered to get into this picture for me for $7. Cigarette money. And I want you to know that Marvin and Perry say the All-America City, what a joke. These are people that I know. These are people, believe it or not, that came along and told me little bits, items, details, and things about what had gone on over the years that indicated the shelter was operating at a negligent standard and that things had been covered up. There was no conspiracy theory. There were things that were definitely covered up related to Housing Systems Corporation and its convolution with law enforcement and the district attorney's office. the PR campaign and propaganda for the Demise Fields project that was being presented for the Sandwich ZBA by Housing Assistance Corporation. They were former executives that ran the Noah shelter that had the idea that they should start an $11.5 million project. Probably would have been much more than that by the time all was said and done if they were able to get the zoning permit. They were not able to get it, thanks to my savvy strategy. They were not able to get it, and it was a very, very difficult PR nightmare for O'Keefe, because the attorney representing Housing Assistance Corporation began threatening me in public, saying that he had clients that could really do me in. This was done on television. There were at least 50 people listening, witnesses that heard him do this. It is Michael Princey, who gave generously to Michael O'Keefe's campaign, and he did boast that he had given a very large contribution to someone in public safety, and that the project would pass whether I liked it or not. And the woman who was spearheading it was Livia Monk Davis of the Moltrup farm in Denmark. It was modeled after her grandfather's farm for criminal offenders in socialist Denmark. And she had told me at one point, I said, Livia, these people are predators. And Livia looked me in the eye and said, who are you to say the predators don't have just as much rights as anyone else? Who are you to say the predators don't have just as many rights as you do? As it turned out, Livia Monk Davis and Rick Brigham were building homes for themselves where they would live with their families, and people from the project that none of the people I knew in downtown Hyannis that had been spinning out of control with narcotics addictions and violent backgrounds coming from incarceration would have been eligible for her project because she didn't want to live with them herself. So being exposed to predators is appropriate for other people, but not for Livia Davis. This was a PR nightmare for Michael O'Keefe because he had taken campaign contributions from the organizations that were sponsoring these lavish projects. Here is a major public relations nightmare for District Attorney Michael O'Keefe. Michael O'Keefe is on record for suggesting we pay a little deference to the human services that at this point are sitting there with him. We know they are harboring convicted felons. Some of the felons are actually on the lam for rape and murder at the time. I assisted with the items that were able to come up as materials to resolve the cases, and O'Keefe is in the cover of his life after this. This is a human service meeting that takes place. This actually takes place before August 19th. On August 19th, all hell broke loose. And O'Keefe was not at the August 19th meeting, but all hell broke loose at the meeting because I had given the materials to the owner of the Radisson Hotel, who was there with his lawyer, and I was able to delay the project. And I was requested to have done this by the Barnstable police to protect someone's job. And these human services turned into absolute animals. They attacked me. They accused me of all kinds of things. And Michael O'Keefe left me in there hanging with absolutely no support whatsoever. Royden Richardson was actually head of the Barnstable Human Service Needs Committee. He's somebody who was dismissed from the Barnstable Superior Court's probation department. He was a probation officer who was charged with molesting probationers. I'm not sure whether he was ever convicted, but the incident was covered up to protect the tenure of Sheriff Jackson Mello. He went on to become the president of the Barnstable Town Council. He ran a venture capitalist business. He was the president of the Barnstable Human Service Needs Committee, or the person in charge. He was on the Charter Commission. He went on and led a very illustrious life as everybody else covered things up for him, coming out of the District Attorney's office, where it is just one big conspiracy to obstruct justice and to conspire to cover just about anything up, including rape and murder. This is one of my favorite photographs, and it's Paula Niedzwiecki, the Chief Financial Officer of the Barnstable District Attorney's Office, who later became the Assistant Manager of the town of Barnstable. And he's at a fundraiser with one of the human service professionals in downtown Hyannis having a cigar. Now, Paula Niedzwiecki actually emerged from a car during a stakeout where there was an attempt to arrest me. And they did call off the arrest because I claimed to be talking to an attorney. I called the old smoke and cell phone trick, that I had been talking to a lawyer on my cell phone, and they did call off the arrest. At one point, it was discovered that in the car, a squad car, was duct, rope tape, and gasoline. This was found actually in one of the squad cars, and Pauline's Wiki knew nothing about it. But getting things done was pretty easy with this photograph because I could blackmail Pauline's Wiki into doing just about anything. You can take a look at the Hyannis map around that shows all of these spots around Hyannis where there were difficulties, arrows pointing where there was heavy drug addiction, where there were heavy child rapists living, heavy numbers of people that were compromised with sociopathic tendencies, people who had committed rape and child rape, just one form of violent crime, other forms of violent crimes. We had arson homicides, we had all kinds of assault and battery. We had really a tremendous number of violent crimes in downtown Hyannis. And this pretty much runs the gamut. And getting Pauline's Wiki to do things, you could tip off Pauline's Wiki and say, whatever you do, don't tell O'Keefe. I'm telling you this under your hat. I'm telling you this on the QT. I'm telling you this in private. Don't let it get back to O'Keefe. And then, depending on how quickly you want to get back to him, you could sit back and look at your watch and see how long it took for the fallout, because you could count on his wiki to basically get the job done. And people kind of look at you funny because you sent all the information to him, but stuff could get done. Pauline's Wiki was a real workhorse, and he could really get stuff done for you. But so far, he hasn't come forward with any information he has related to violent crime and information that was given to him in regard to corruption. So I'm not sure. He's married to Sheriff Cummings' daughter, and I'm sure his first obligation is to protect Sheriff Cummings, who is also retiring along with O'Keefe. This was a major PR nightmare for O'Keefe that evolved in 2003-2004. It turns out that O'Keefe had met with an author who was writing a book about the Worthington murder, and he spilled items and details about the murder to the author and spoke disparagingly about the victim. At this point, he does not know it is a rape. After my discussion with Pauline's Wiki in the slide previously during the botched arrest, they did question me about the condition of the body, and at that point I realized the profile that I was developing for the offender was more consistent with a sociopath that would have some form of sociopathy, some sort of breaking and entering for narcotics, and there was a rape involved. The body had cooled, so Michael O'Keefe, not being quite so bright, did not realize that the semen deposit that was left in the body was actually from a non-consensual sexual encounter that she had with the rapist and not with some lover that he assumed she had. He said disparaging things about her, referred to her as an equal opportunity employer, meaning she would get involved and have sexual intercourse with anyone. She referred to her as, I think he referred to her as a slut. He said that she was the kind of woman who, excuse the expletive, fuck her best friend's husbands just to be able to prove she could do it. He told the news journalist, or the journalist that was writing the book, Maria Fluke, that we'll talk about how we keep our mouths shut. Newsflash, O'Keefe, she's a journalist. This is the arrest of Christopher McCowan for the murder of Krista Worthington. As you can see, the newspaper is reporting that there is a DNA match that nailed the Slay suspect. Michael O'Keefe had gone on what I call a needle in a haystack method of trying to find a perpetrator, running around taking DNA from just about every man, or as I say, you have a ding-a-ling, how about you? You could be the suspect. And he was on this process of being able to use some sort of deduction if your DNA did not match to the semen that was found in the body cavity, which they did not realize was the product of a rape. The body had cooled and the semen had begun to break down, and because of this, they assumed that she had had consensual sex at one point and then was murdered by a jealous lover at a later point. O'Keefe simply did not realize the body had cooled. The coroner was off on the time of death, and because she was dead or dying when he raped her, the body showed no signs of resistance and showed no signs of a rape. But O'Keefe does seem to tell people that there is a DNA match. This is Christopher Mason, who is now he's the corporal and head of the state troopers in this town. Knew nothing about what I'm about to tell you on the next slide. He's arresting Christopher McCowan. He arrested McCowan, told McCowan he had his DNA. McCowan claims to have been asking for a lawyer, was never afforded a lawyer. The interview was not taped, and they are leaving with a suspect that they really should have charged with jaywalking or something unusual, something minor, and built a case against him. But District Attorney Michael O'Keefe's name was being bandied about for U.S. Attorney, and he had made a fool out of himself in the investigation of this case, and he was willing to do anything he had to be able to make the case, including use me. As you can see here, District Attorney Michael O'Keefe's office, actually through Judge Welsh, has petitioned to have the DNA taken from the defendant after the arrest. The order to compel McCowan to give the DNA is for August 10th of 2005, but the arrest of McCowan was actually in April of 2005, indicating that the Barnstable Attorney's Office never had any DNA. The only DNA they did have was in a warm body cavity that had broken down. Judge Joan Lynch is Michael O'Keefe's former wife, and she's a compromised person. O'Keefe has a lot on her. She is really, really tough on crime, really tough on men, women's issues, and may have just done this and is really unsure at this point as to whether this was a good idea. She does say she can tie up an immunity deal and that I have done the right thing by coming forward. O'Keefe never has any DNA, and Judge Welsh, who actually his name is on this, he's actually the one who has filed the motion. He has gone on to become a judge. He's the son of a judge and the grandson of a judge. He has done this, covered the whole thing up, and he is now a judge himself. Editor Seth Rollbine of the Cape Cod Voice, now defunct, told me that I actually am the original person behind the article that was developed in regard to the illustrious case against our district attorney, Michael O'Keefe. The title is because when he invited Maria Flick to his house and was taking her out to the Wampanoag Ball, and she put $50 in his campaign coffers, he actually took a shower and paraded out in a towel as he disparaged the reputation of the rape victim. This is how he conducted himself. So they're making a little bit of commentary and poking a little bit of fun at Michael O'Keefe. As far as I'm concerned, you can never poke enough. And he plays an awful lot of golf. Apparently, he has improved his handicap, according to people who play with him. I would want you to know that the three people that I had forwarded information to, attorney Drew Sagadelli, author Peter Manzo, who has since died, and Bill Henchy, that I forwarded information to, who was representing the Sandwich Family Association and the Dana's Fields Project, are all interviewed for this article. He talks a lot about Michael O'Keefe taking DNA from a number of men and never returning the DNA to them. They had to sue the Barnstable Attorney's Office to be able to get their DNA back. It talks about police corruption, police tactics. This is a major public relations embarrassment for Michael O'Keefe, another public relations nightmare, PR disaster that was embarrassing and humiliating once again for District Attorney Michael O'Keefe. As all of these things are going on, I'm continuing to collect all kinds of data, items, any type of police reports, court reports, anything that will show that the organization is operating at a negligent standard. Interesting over here is a flyer that somebody developed when they were trying to push through the Mildred's Charterhouse Fish Landing Expansion Project to put all the debilitated people that had spun out of control with alcoholism and drug addiction from the Noah Shelter and the Duffy Clinic. They were going to put them all in this expanded project in this one section of town, while Livia Davis and Rick Brigham, two executives, went and lived in their $11.5 million, would be $25 million project, with their $500,000 homes in Sandwich for homeless people and criminal offenders that weren't anywhere near as dangerous as the ones that were living in Hyannis. So I was continuing to take pictures and collect evidence. Cape Cod is not exactly a paradise peninsula. Between 2001 and 2008, the homeless population was decimated. On the day of the All-America City Parade, I went and paid $50 to people I knew that had been homeless at the shelter, and I asked them how they felt about the quality of human services. As you can see, they've made their opinions known. In Hyannis' downtown, very close to Main Street, at one time I had the support of police, fire, and rescue. But they become puppets at the hands of the politically powerful, and not all of the police have their hearts in the right places. Police corruption continues unabated. There are a number of police officers that I have caught in drug deals themselves. The homeless can tell you there are cases where homeless or mentally ill or drug-addicted people can tell you that the police have been known to take drugs off them, leave, not chart that they have taken. There are no arrests made. They just take the drugs, and it looks like they're selling them themselves. I know I was threatened by a police officer that I had caught in a drug deal gone bad, and I was threatened and intimidated by him. It is Sean Roycroft of the Barnstable Police. We know that Cronin and Crowley are on the down low. We know that Campbell was on the down low. And as long as this is going on, they are never going to run the narcotics problem off the Cape, nor the violent crime that's associated with it. This photograph I took out of my home, out of the apartment where I was living, became a PR nightmare because of the Mildred Chowderhouse Fish Landing expansion project that I blocked. The executives, including Judy Best of the Duffy Clinic, told me that, or told the entire airport commission and the Barnstable officials that were there, that there were no serious drug problems associated with the shelter. As you can see, we have Perry and we have Eddie Reed, who could honestly wash my back for me. And Barbie Zabutis, who they put a fentanyl patch on about 2 weeks later. She was dead about 2.5 months later. Here they are freebasing in the backyard with heroin. After the death of Jonathan Wessner in Falmouth, there was a push on to be able to name sex felons and to put them up on a website. We were just starting with the sex offender registry and placing it where we're going to put it up and where we can post it. And this was in the newspaper, police fail in naming sex felons. Several of these people and several people in the organization, several people in the article were known to the NOAA shelter. Rick Presbury, who is the CEO of HAC, described me as irresponsible at the airport commission meetings for suggesting there were any sex felons associated with the shelter, and that Chief John Finnegan would confirm that this was a fallacy, this was simply not the truth, and there were no sex felons known to the shelter. This is the obituary of Jonathan Wessner. This is a major PR problem for Michael O'Keefe because Jonathan Wessner was murdered in 2003, and Judy Best of the Duffy Clinic, who's claiming there were no felons associated with this shelter. Apparently Paul Nolan was associated with the shelter complex, and Judy Best was working on getting licensure to work as a certified nurse specialist at Cape Cod Hospital, and there was a young boy who was trying to shake a drug addiction, young guy. He was in his 20s, he was about 22, and he had driven Paul Nolan back to Hyannis from Brockton after he had murdered his friend, Jonathan Wessner. At this time, Michael O'Keefe has no idea that this was a drug-related incident and that there is a material witness out there, and that Judy Best claims that there are no felons associated with the shelter, and Michael O'Keefe has taken campaign contributions from them. As it turns out, because I was able to prove that there was a material witness and that she had conspired to obstruct justice and was tampering with material witness, Michael O'Keefe quietly leaned on whoever he had to lean on to have her fired out of the clinic that she founded, the Duffy Clinic. So this was a major PR problem. After a nearly 20-year investigation of District Attorney Michael O'Keefe, started by me, RICO case, Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organization statute that O'Keefe is in violation of, the Human Services are in violation of, the town of Barnstable is in violation of. I can tell you that the materials were downed over to the U.S. Attorney's Office as far back as 2007. Mr. O'Keefe is under investigation. He's been picked up on wiretaps by the U.S. Attorney's Office. And the one thing I would want you to know, the most recent public relations nightmare for Michael O'Keefe was the conviction of Thomas Latanowicz for the shooting death of Sergeant John Gannon on August 20th, 2001. In November 2021, I met with Tommy Latanowicz's family. They indicated Tommy was a client of the NOAA shelter and the Duffy Clinic. O'Keefe was willing to say that he was just some guy from Somerville who happened to be partying down here with 5 kilos of cocaine and a firearm, and that he didn't really know him very well. As you know, they were referring to him as 125. He had so many arrests. They were not convictions, but 125 arrests. Tommy was known to be violent. I've been studying his psychological structure. He appears to be sociopathic with psychopathic tendencies, and the only match for him is Michael O'Keefe, who has been covering this up all along and thought he could continue to cover this up. And here are the usual suspects. What happened was the culmination of a public relations nightmare, a press conference that went down after the conviction of Tommy Latanwich for Sergeant Sean Gannon's murder. Here are the usual suspects: First Assistant Michael Trudeau, ADA Dan Higgins, and Chief Frank Ferguson of the Yarmouth Police Department. They were present when O'Keefe began threatening me. He intimidated me. He accused me of things he simply could not prove. He tried to worm his way out of all kinds of impropriety. I continued to confront him. He threatened my family, and at this point, it has become known because I have forwarded, it took me 3 months to come up with the documentation, forwarded it to, this is young ADA Dan Higgins, to see if there's anything he could do about O'Keefe, to see if there's any type of settlement that could be made for me, and any type of closure or shutting of the no shelter. So far, I haven't seen any. I've only seen people do what is best for them. Released to the press on January 5th of 2022. It has been the honor of my professional life to have been elected 5 times by the voters of the Cape Cod and Islands and to have led the office of professional and dedicated prosecutors. After much reflection, I have decided not to seek a 6th term as district attorney. I must say that neither myself nor the assistant district attorneys who work in this office should be effective at this job without the excellent support staff, victim witness assistants, and police agencies who serve us all every day. In the time remaining in this term, we will continue to serve the people of Cape Cod and Islands. On February 16th of 2022, after my encouragement and after my having sent him substantial documents, court records, substantial documentation to show that the district attorney is under investigation, young Assistant District Attorney Dan Higgins takes over from the shady O'Keefe, announcing his candidacy for the Barnstable District Attorney's office. The question remains, Mr. Higgins, will you sell your soul to the devil to get what you want? At the news conference that derailed and became a public relations nightmare, culminating in a news conference that was a public relations disaster that brought about the demise of Michael O'Keefe, I explained to Michael O'Keefe who I was and who my family was. At one point, I had explained to him that I didn't care what happened to me. I cared what happened to my family. He said he would remember that, and I considered it an intimidation tactic and a threat to me and to my family. I told Mr. O'Keefe I would destroy Michael O'Keefe with my family, with my children in my family, if it's the last thing I ever did. The children in my family would like to say goodbye to Mr. O'Keefe, and then I'd like to tell you who I am. Meet the witness. Legal name Corey Mary Griffin. Student at the University of Massachusetts at Dartmouth. BSN from Georgetown University. Master's from Boston College. MPP from one of the greatest schools I've ever been to, the University of Massachusetts at Dartmouth. Go Corsairs! Finishing up on a Master of Arts in the University of Massachusetts at Dartmouth, Professional Writing and Communications program. I'm an intern in Sean O'Connell's office. I've been an analyst for healthcare and education policy analysis at Sean O'Connell's representative when she was representative, and I lobbied for pediatric mental health care issues. I'm the state's material witness in an ongoing criminal investigation involving the convolution of the District Attorney's Office, the Barnstable Police Department, and the Human Services. It's nice to meet you.